So today we get to welcome a wonderful speaker, Jeremy, as part of one of our digital encounters here with ATD Central Florida. Today, Jeremy Royster will share with us how to have a fearless adventures in learning using his Fail University model. So just as a reminder, this is our team that gets to support our whole chapter. Of course, we have our president, Zizo, and our past president, Rosa, who is amazing, our VP of programs, Corinne, and a wonderful breadth of people who are helping us all today. I am here with you today. My name is Elizabeth, and I am the social media director for our chapter. So all those posts on LinkedIn and Facebook, probably me and some of our other partners here as well. So I'm glad to do it. Been a part of the chapter since 2012. Love it. Just another thing that we're talking about, ATD National and ATD Central Florida work together in conjunction to have what's called a power membership. So you have both the benefits of national and our local chapter together. So if you're thinking about, what opportunities might exist with one or the other, know that, gosh, I just love being a power member, quite honestly. A lot of great studies and articles I get to have from national and a lot of great events from us here in the Central Florida as well. One of the things that we have now is we have new here for our chapter. We've been approved for continuing education credits. So those of you who are joining us today get to partake in this. If you have a CPTD or APTD credentials and you're looking for those continuing education credits, know that the programming that we offer, including today's, is going to be available as part of the continuing education credits for you to remain for your certificate, professional certificate. This year's theme is building a high impact. Oops, I went too far. Gone too far. There we go. Is building a high impact culture of learning here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hand that off over to Jeremy. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we are excited to have you here for Central Florida ATD.
Welcome, everyone. I can't see you, but it's nice to speak to you all. And as Elizabeth said, my name is Jeremy Royster, and I'm the founder of Fail University. Fail University is an unusual name. I recognize that for a university, and I've gotten a lot of heat for it over the last couple of years that I've been in business. But I've also gotten some praise as well, because the model of my university is really to reframe failure. That is the objective. So I'll talk to you about that, about why that is the model, what failure has to do with success, how gaming plays a role. FAIL is an acronym that stands for Fearless Adventures in Learning. And let's just get the presentation started here. And we at Fail University know that failure isn't permanent. Just as successful people know it. And we want to understand and help students that give up surmount their failures, surmount their obstacles. So I was partly inspired to start this program by Sir Ken Robinson. I'm going to introduce you to his basic theory in a couple of minutes. It's about a 1.5-minute video that talks about the problems that he sees with the education system as it exists today.
Every country on earth at the moment is reforming public education. We're getting our children through education by anesthetizing them. And I think we should be doing the exact opposite. We shouldn't be putting them asleep. We should be waking them up to what they have inside of themselves. But the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modeled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organized on factory lines, so ringing bells, separate facilities, specialized into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. We put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? Why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? It's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. You know what I mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm.
And that's what we're aiming to do at Fail University, is to change the paradigm. Sir Ken Robinson's Do Kill's Creativity TED Talk is the most watched TED Talk of all time. And he talks about creativity as something that is missing in our schools, and the reason for that being that we are not personalizing. You never come up with anything original if you're not prepared to be wrong. And by the time they get to be adults, most kids have lost that capacity. They become frightened of being wrong. And we run our companies like this. We stigmatize mistakes. And we're now running national education systems where mistakes are the worst thing you can make. That is a creativity killer. One of the other thing that it's a killer of is engagement. The national survey in 2018 found that 29% of current high school students in 2018 were bored all or most of the time, and 42 of them were bored some of the time. Engagement decreases the more time students spend in school. 8 out of 10 elementary school students are engaged, as opposed to 6 out of 10 middle school students and 4 out of 10 high school students. How do we fix that? In addition, the United States isn't performing very well when compared internationally. This list over here on the right shows the number of countries with average scores in reading, math, and science that are higher than the US average, according to a 2015 PISA study. We ranked 38th out of 71 countries in math, and 30 out of 35 among our peers, 24th out of 71 in science, and 19 out of 35 among our peers. Lack of engagement certainly can play a role in that. And so to address some of the engagement concerns that have become obvious, there has been a trend moving towards gamification, game-based learning, and serious or applied games. That's certainly our focus here. Game-based learning, the column in the middle there, is Fail's focus and our preference for the way to introduce gaming into education, not only of students, but also of teachers that are learning how to engage students. You actually, when working through courses designed by Fail University to learn how to gamify or create game-based learning experiences for your children, you are going through a game-based learning experience of your own. It models it for you. The inspiration for tying failure, shame, gaming, and grit together comes from experts that have led the way in those areas. Super Better by Jane McGonigal is a well-known book that is a recipe for gamifying your life, living gamefully. Jane herself suffered from a traumatic head injury and figured out that she could set small goals for herself that were like games in order to recover. And she found that playing to get better at anything really does help you become more resilient in life. And that is the goal. Overcoming failures is the definition of resilience. And Angela Duckworth, shortly after Jane's best-selling book, became well known for her definition of grit. And her definition is that grit involves setting long-term goals and then persevering through multiple failures in order to achieve them. And therefore, through her research, she found that that definition of grit was deterministic of future success. Another pioneer in this area is Brené Brown. Her research found the relationship between shame and the public perception of failure, especially in classrooms. How failure is stigmatized in classrooms can create an environment in which students are paralyzed. They are crippled by shame or fear of shame and are afraid to take risks that would help them be more creative. And there is a growing body of research on this relationship between games, grit, and shame. I'm not going to get into the details right now. This evidence will be presented in pieces as we go. So as I talk to you during this presentation, I'll be focusing on 4 areas: fixed versus growth mindset. Fixed mindset being the problem that Fail University is trying to fix by implementing an environment with growth mindsets for students and teachers. Standardized versus personalized curriculum. Exclusive versus inclusive educational options. And punitive versus rewarding assessments and learning and lessons that actually are embedded within assessments. So the pedagogy that Fail University employs is called Game Ed X, X for experience, and they focus on creating an environment that promote intrinsic motivation, personalized goals, and reframing failures as learning opportunities. And I'll get into the details of these different pieces of the pedagogy in smaller chunks as we move through the presentation. Game Ed X and Fail University strive to meet standards that are universal standards being used by school systems today. We work through the Common Core. We are promoting grit. We are including social emotional learning skills. In fact, all of these skills, the 21st century skills, the 4 C's, Bloom's higher level thinking skills, those universal skills that are transferable to careers, they are the 21st century skills that are most likely to be flexible enough for students to succeed in any career. Those are more important than any content taught in lessons designed according to the Game Ed X pedagogy. So let's dive into the fixed versus growth mindset, what that means. So these terms, growth mindset and fixed mindset, were coined by Carol Dweck, a Stanford PhD researcher, who was actually the inspiration and mentor of Angela Duckworth. And she found that multiple studies show that children are acutely aware of where they stand and identify as smart or not smart, beliefs that can stick with them for life. The damaging effects of believing that you are not smart can give you a fixed mindset. That is, in fact, what a fixed mindset is. The belief that you are fixed in that role, whether you are good at math or bad at math, is something, if you believe that you are eternally good at math or bad at math, that will prevent and inhibit your growth in that area. Whereas the growth mindset reframes failures as a learning opportunity and facilitates better performance on the transfer of learning tasks. So this mindset, just thinking about how learning is possible and how actual intelligence improvement is possible, recognizing that that is real, that is possible, makes a difference in terms of whether or not it happens. And Dweck also found that there are students that are accustomed to success. This I found remarkable. Students that are accustomed to success are actually at a disadvantage when facing a challenge outside of their comfort zone. So those students that have historically persisted through challenging schoolwork, those students who struggle and persist are more likely to complete math problems that have previously been abandoned as unsolvable. This is a study that was shown. And in general, are more likely to struggle through and persist through any difficult situation, any difficult problem, whether it be academic or not. You have to practice this. You have to practice failing and then recovering in order to be resilient, in order to grow as a learner. So Fail University leverages fun and failure in order to achieve that end, in order for students to maximize their learning potential. A theory of fun by Ralph Koster identified and defined learning and games, that is, as learning tools. Games are fun, he says, because they provide that moment of triumph when we learn something or master a task. In other words, with games, learning is the drug. And another study called Failing Up, How Failure in a Game Environment Promotes Learning Through Discourse, found that the number of level failures in an educational game is shown as a positive predictor of learning gains. The more a student fails, is directly correlated, positively correlated with the learning gains that they achieve. So how does GameEdX, how does Fail University do this? Well, this is the pedagogy I was talking about before. And one way that, that learning is enhanced, those learning outcomes are enhanced and grit are enhanced, are through specific techniques that are used in the design of lessons. Offering retakes and revisions is resilience building. Setting up your point system so that points are accumulated rather than deducted is also resilience building. Offering resources and accessories needed to complete missions or quests, and as lessons are called in the Fail U vernacular, available as needed, making the learning easier just in time, making those resources available just in time, and making those resources feel relevant, and also giving immediate automatic self or peer or teacher feedback. And we'll talk about the distinction and the importance of self versus peer versus teacher feedback also falls into that category. Making lessons available on demand, which is, by the way, all of these different steps may seem daunting, but with the accessibility of Chromebooks that has been accelerated with the onslaught of COVID-19, these types of design techniques are not insurmountable. They are, in fact, well within teachers' reach if they do, in fact, have Chromebooks or some sort of one-to-one relationship with device to student relationship in their school, which is more and more common now that COVID-19 has struck. And also making lessons self-paced. So not only the lessons self-paced, asynchronous, but also that each lesson itself is on demand in a sequence within a set topic. And there are steps that occur within these GameEdX pedagogical lessons that will promote grit. All of these techniques, all of these different behaviors and choices and actions that are being taken by students are promoting grit. So creating original solutions to game challenges. And by the way, I'll remind you that these lessons are designed like games. So considering solution proposals from others, collaboration is huge and certainly makes the learning more fun and productive and efficient. Tracking game elements, trying a new approach, putting forward solutions, solving complex problems, all of these are part of the design of a GameEdX lesson. Now, the other problem that we're facing is standardized curriculum versus what Fail U tries to offer, which is a personalized approach. And that recalls what Sir Ken Robinson was calling for, a personalized approach to stimulate creativity and increase engagement. So did I make sure I didn't skip something here? Nope, okay. Now, just as Ken Robinson said, personalized curricula will target individual interests and it will reverse the creativity decline. The problem is that right now in school systems, creativity gets less attention than skills that are easier to assess. It's a lot easier to automate and also grade the assessments that have one answer. So a multiple choice test, for example, or a fill in the blank test. Those are not often testing for thinking skills beyond memorization or comprehension or application. To get to those higher level thinking skills, creativity, You really need different kinds of assessments. And we're going to be talking about how games themselves can be assessments. Creativity is hugely important as we move into the future. This is the information age, and there's an increasing demand for highly skilled, flexible thinkers, and there is less demand for those applicants who are low skilled or have skills that are easily automatable. And as a result of this, Bloom's taxonomy has been reversed. It used to have the largest part of a pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid, the remembering part. That was a suggestion, at least, that remembering was a skill that was a foundational number one, and also one that was more common and perhaps inappropriately should be the greatest focus. Whereas now creating at the top is that skill is the most attractive skill to employers. Creativity also falls into the 4 C's, those 4 skills that have been distilled from the original 21st century skills that were a trend about 15 years ago, and now they've been distilled. Creativity made the cut, one of the 4 most important skills that employers are looking for. One of the reasons that students are disengaged, one of the reasons that they are not reaching their potential is because they're not finding their studies relevant. And if they're not feeling that their studies are relevant, they're not going to be engaged. Students, this Strata to Gallup survey here, let's make sure I didn't, showed the importance of student choice and how highly they ranked the quality of a course. It depended upon whether or not they thought the skills that they learned in the course were something that they could use in the future. That makes sense, certainly. The percent of students who, according to a Youth Truth survey, found their studies relevant was 54% of middle schoolers and 46% of high schoolers. That's way too low. Relevance of the student engagement measures in a 2017 study found that relevance was the least occurring quality of lessons that these students encountered. And the reason for this, partly I think, is because teachers they aren't able to answer the question, why do I have to learn this? It's not a fault necessarily of the teachers. It just happens to be that the makeup of, and I am a teacher, by the way, I teach 6th grade, and in addition to graduate school, with regard to how to teach using these techniques. But so I recognize that I too have no prior work experience other than my entire career as an educator. It never spanned beyond the school system. And I learned how to be a student in school, and then I learned how to be a teacher in school, and then I became a teacher. So I've never left the school system. So, and I'm like 46% of teachers that also have no prior work experience. How, if I've had no prior work experience, can I explain the relevance of what a student is learning? It's certainly harder. 35% had some of the teachers in this survey had some prior work experience, and only 19% had more than 6 years. Not only are teachers having trouble defining the relevance of their curriculum, they're also, the curriculum itself is not relevant. One of the reasons for that is because there's no way to predict what the careers will be upon graduation. The skills that we are teaching right now, and that's not necessarily, the more we teach skills like creativity, the more relevant we are. But since we are not teaching those universal 21st century skills as often as we should, the curriculum becomes less relevant. That's what I mean by curricular irrelevance. And 27% of college grads upon graduation only 27% found, according to a Federal Reserve Bank of New York survey, found a job related to their major. And only 62% have a job that required a degree at all. That's unacceptable. And there's a big problem too with tracking and how that sets up students for for failure, a failure that is not easily overcome. Joe Baylor, a Stanford math professor, recognized that statistics, working with big data, it's really important, but it's like a poor cousin to calculus in the United States, not emphasized enough. And because math curriculum isn't relevant enough, and because math curriculum is disproportionately influential in ability tracking, then we have students that start to feel that they are dumb because they don't understand math, because the math doesn't seem relevant. And it's 78% of, or excuse me, 75% of 8th grade math students are tracked according to math. And it's not just math that students are tracked according to, because what happens is as soon as you're tracking according to one subject, there's a segregation that occurs in the school whereby students self-identify as either smart or not smart. And they know where they stand. They know what the smart classes are, quote unquote smart classes are, and they know where they stand. And that follows them throughout their schooling career and their lives. That feeling of inadequacy or superiority depended upon how they were tracked according to their ability within math. So how does Fail University combat this lack of meaning? How do lessons created according to the Game edX pedagogy offer meaning? Well, one way is to allow students, create situations where students can pursue their own interests, where they can pursue questions that they might have, inquiry-driven pursuits. That it's not difficult to create an environment where students have that flexibility. Another offering is that there are ways to create game scenarios that are realistic, that simulate a profession, a relevant profession, an existing profession. And those real-world simulations can make the instruction feel more meaningful, in addition to actually being more meaningful. Critical thinking and grit are fostered most in games that give players maximum agency to define their game world, according to experts. And so another way to give that sense of meaning is to immerse students in compelling worlds, 3D graphics, immersive storyline. That storyline is key, and it's not difficult to have the basic storyline in a regular lesson to create this objective obstacle and imaginary character that could be this avatar, whether it's a digital avatar or just an identity that a student adopts. It's not a huge shift to create just to tweak a lesson so that it feels more meaningful. That storyline actually can substitute if you're struggling to create actual meaning or to find actual relevance to careers that exist today. The storyline can substitute. The storyline can make it feel meaningful. Providing agency, the choice, is also a way to generate meaning. So differentiated choices, again, enabling students to pursue lines of inquiry, allowing for more collaboration for students to choose who they work with, whether or not to work with someone, allowing more options for free expression, more creative options for ways to demonstrate their learning, and also for students to champion a personal cause, if at all possible. It depends on the lesson, certainly, but there are, in social studies, I teach social studies to 6th graders, there are plenty of opportunities for that. And also in Game edX lessons, there are steps that do encourage the building of these super skills, these 4 C's, and the higher order thinking skills. They're explicit steps that take place within a properly designed Game edX lesson, creating original solutions to whether it be a game challenge or a problem, considering solution proposals, that's working again collaboratively, tracking game elements to make connections in service of a goal, trying a new approach, pivoting after failure, putting forward solutions to game challenges. All of these types of these actions, which are inherent in playing well-designed learning games, will build super skills, these transferable universal skills. Now, another obstacle, another barrier to education equity and also engagement is exclusivity. We know, we've all heard about the scandals revolving around the bribes that were paid to various officials for certain affluent members of society to get their students into college. That's an extreme version of the exclusivity that exists, that makes it harder for the average student to see a potential future through the education system. Harvard, for example, despite the fact that they have billions of dollars in endowment funds that they could spend to enroll more students in their program, they're not interested in doing that, nor are a number of colleges that have huge endowments, because they're, according to Malcolm Gladwell, a famous author and sociologist, they're in the luxury handbag business, so to speak. They're interested in sustaining a certain brand equity. Expanding the size of their schools is diluting the brand. So that's part of the exclusivity problem. Another problem is that schools are businesses. They depend upon funds. So there are different categories of schools that identify themselves as either need aware or need sensitive, as opposed to need blind. And those need aware and need sensitive colleges will give preference to students who can pay full tuition over a student of equal ability who cannot. And this is a list of just some examples of those colleges that identify as need aware and need sensitive, as opposed to, again, need blind means that you aren't giving preference. Also, schools are often ranked according to how selective they are. So if you want to be ranked highly, you ought to be more selective. There's a book called The Meritocracy Trap that came out recently by Daniel Markovitz, which talks about how there is one of the barriers that has been created is this meritocratic culture that we have that's based on a meritocracy is an elite group of people whose progress is based on ability and talent rather than on class, privilege, or wealth. Now, certainly, that is a noble aspiration to be a meritocracy is not on its face a bad thing. It's an improvement over the way wealth used to be held only in the hands of the few, not only in the United States, but throughout the world, although there are trends moving in the other direction where the income equality gap is growing. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But regardless, that creates its own problem. This idea that you are deserving of your wealth through hard work and effort it can be problematic because it frames disadvantage in terms of individual defects of skill and effort. And the thing is, if you have wealth in your family, if you are able to afford specialized skill training and tutoring, which those who are wealthy can do, it creates a cycle that is difficult for anyone less than affluent to compete with. So the middle class and lower classes can't afford the private schooling, the specialized training, and the tutoring, and so they are less competitive in the job market. And and certainly this specialized training and tutoring and private schooling, it all involves a lot of work, and that's admirable. However, it's also expensive. So even though it doesn't matter how much someone from the middle class who can't afford this tutoring or lower class who can't afford this tutoring works, they can't compete. And so because of this stigma, because of this preference, he says, this cultural belief that any failing is a personal failure, anyone who is not able to compete in the job market is a personal failure. It has justified more testing in public schools, an overpriced college education, and an overvaluing of credentials. So those brand name colleges, for example, Harvard and so forth. And also has created this, this hard work bias. Certainly, again, hard work. It's a worthy aspiration. It's something that is part of the American ethos, but underprivileged students are less likely to be able to make their work efficient, especially at home. And that has been exacerbated by COVID-19 because so much of the work is happening at home now and may continue into the future, even when COVID-19 ends or when it's under control. They're less likely to have a computer. They're less likely to have internet. They're less likely to have parental support. So that extra work is less productive for students that don't fall into those affluent categories that have those extra supports. This hard work bias is born of the average work week, which is high in the United States. Full-time workers average 47 hours per week, but those who are in the upper echelons of the wealth classes are working even longer hours. And another problem, not only with the prospects being limited by a lack of if your homework scores suffer, certainly your prospects at attending college and getting scholarships suffers. But that's not the only reason that there are fewer undergraduates who fall into less affluent classes. One of the reasons is simply the cost of college, which is prohibitive, increasingly prohibitive. It's the 38% of the reason 38% of students drop out for that very reason, that of financial pressure. Tuition has been increasing over the last 20 to 30 years. We can see, I'm not going to get into all the details of that right now, but also income inequality is increasing, especially with the onslaught of COVID-19. So, and the people that are hurt most by this income inequality, disadvantaged peoples, tend to be Black and Hispanic, people from minorities like Black and Hispanic. Their median incomes are only 60% of what the typical white median income is, and the Hispanic is only 63%. So these people have barriers that are set up that have nothing to do with hard work, despite the myth of the meritocracy. So Fail University tries to, first of all, all of the gaming style engaging lessons offered through university can be and are encouraged to be offered online. Now, there are certainly drawbacks to offering lessons online exclusively, and they are not exclusive. The online presentation offers a great deal more benefits than detriments according to at least our opinion and the pedagogy that we've designed, because it offers so many opportunities for agency mastery that is specific to each student's skill level, and opportunities for a sense of purpose because of that flexibility and the access to the internet. It's not comparable to offerings that are pen and paper, and certainly also pen and paper can limit a teacher's ability to be creative and to preserve their creativity for the long term, and to build upon and edit and revise their creative designs, lesson designs. Online access also creates an environment that is more openly and easily accessible to people of lower socioeconomic classes, assuming that they have internet connectivity, which is more common as a result of COVID-19. They are more likely, and in higher education situations, Black and Latino Americans are more likely to consider non-traditional providers such as online classes. Major problem also is the nature of the way we grade. It's our grading system, our testing system is punitive versus rewarding. Standardized tests in and of themselves became a big thing in 2002 with the passage of the No Child Left Behind Act, because it required that all grades 3 through 8 participate in at least an annual standardized test. And the pressure on schools to have their students perform in those tests was huge, because if schools did not meet the AYP, the adequate yearly progress threshold, they would be publicly labeled as failing. And so as a result of that, teaching to the test became more commonplace. And not to mention, there was even, fudging of scores and inappropriate behavior by administrators and teachers who felt that felt that their careers were in jeopardy if their students didn't perform to these standardized tests. There has been a revision of this law in 2015, the Every Student Succeeds Act, but there is still required annual testing in grades 3 through 8 and also once in high school. And results must be publicly reported, which still puts pressure on teachers to teach to the test. There is no incentive if there's that much pressure to meet these certain test score thresholds. Then there's little incentive to change assessment practices. And the GPA is also problematic in and of itself. A grade point averaging scores, it's antithetical to mastery. If you fail once, you have already, if you've done anything, it doesn't matter if by the end of your course, whether you've mastered all of the curriculum at all, if you have stumbled on the way toward mastery, that's what counts. Making those mistakes count negatively in your grade point average, which is hugely, the grade point average is hugely influential in terms of how colleges rank you and perceive you and offer scholarships or even entrance into their colleges. So risk taking is discouraged by the grade point average. It's a flawed statistic. Not to mention, these punitive assessments increase stress. A recent survey in 2018 found that 31% of high school students are stressed all or most of the time, 42% some of the time. That's too many. So how do we make assessments more rewarding? How do we make teaching more rewarding? Well, I'm going to share a brief philosophy about that from Dan Pink, who is he's a lawyer by trade, and his research into the research of motivation was his TED Talk, very well received and popular TED Talk, is catering towards a business audience, but the rules apply to the education world as well.
If we really want high performance on those definitional tasks of the 21st century, we need a whole new approach. The good news about all this is that the scientists who've been studying motivation have given us this new approach. It's an approach built much more around intrinsic motivation, around the desire to do things because they matter, because we like it, because they're interesting, because they're part of something important. And to my mind, that new operating system for our businesses revolves around 3 elements: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, the urge to direct our own lives. Mastery, the desire to get better and better at something that matters. And purpose, the yearning to do what we do in the service of something larger than ourselves. These are the building blocks of an entirely new operating system for our businesses.
Now, again, he mentions businesses there, but the rules apply in education. What is intrinsically motivating in the business world is also intrinsically motivating in the education world. And all of the pedagogical skills and the strategies that I've mentioned so far fall into one of those 3 categories, as you see from this chart here on the right. Mastery includes 4 of the first ones that I mentioned: agency and meaning, all the other ones that I mentioned. Another way to create meaning, which we've touched on already, is and to create a more relevant environment, one that is more engaging, is to offer students the choice of building their own curriculum. And this also applies to creating new ways to assess themselves. Let's watch. This is Peter Hutton, who's a principal at the Templeton High School in Australia.
Going to school is like getting on a bus. 30 students get on. The teacher assumes their rightful position at the front of the class. They take the roll and they set off. And they set off at a blinding speed. And they can basically, they're driving along, they're making great time, a little history on the right, a little Pythagoras on the left. But I'm sorry, we can't stop because we've got a schedule to keep to. Now the problem is some kids are so smart that they could jump out of the moving bus, circle it several times and jump back on. For others, they've missed some sort of interconnecting stop several stops ago. And yet the education system marches on. Now my question to you is, what if we were to enable students to design and control their own education? What if instead of doing education to students, we actually allowed them to use the staff and the school and the wider community to manage and design their own education?
And he goes on to explain how he does that. Were in that school, I believe, 141 options that were of different curricular paths that students could take. And then if they didn't find a passion in any of those, among those options, they could create their own under the tutelage of the staff at the school. There's also something called the Big Picture Program in the United States, which is doing something similar. They're in 60 plus schools in 28 states in the United States where play, relevance, and choice play a large role in the student creations. They are involved in self-assessment and authentic feedback, and they have a proficiency-based diploma, proficiency/mastery. Self-assessment has been shown to be let's see here, self-assessment and peer assessment. There's a study, I don't know if I put it in here, but there's a study that shows how those two methods of assessment are of equal quality to teacher assessment. In fact, I believe it was peer self-assessment was actually of better quality. They were more likely to have a better outcome and a more accurate assessment, assuming that there is teacher guidance with the rubric building, than teacher assessment, who has to grade hundreds of assignments at a time. And certainly, I know from experience, loses focus and objectivity. So Game edX sleuths, and those sleuths, that's the vernacular for students, learners, game players, they self and peer assess. And and by doing that, they can earn the title of Master Sleuth, and then Master Sleuths, make sure that not only that they've achieved certain standards in order to earn that title, but also that they provide opportunities for those who are not yet Master Sleuths to achieve those standards themselves. So steps such as these in the left-hand column, again, they're common steps and activities and actions that are performed by people who play well-designed Game edX games. And while they are performing these steps, they are meeting all of these standards at different times, certainly. Grit, SEL skills, 21st century 4C skills, higher thinking skills, and common core skills. And so that's it. That is the summary of the argument in favor of the Game edX approach of tying failure to fun, of destigmatizing failure, of making students less afraid of taking risks, which is certainly easier in a gaming environment because you get to play again in a game. You've reframed the learning as something fun. You've reframed it as something that is not punitive. You've also given students, if the game is well designed, options to create meaning for themselves, to master skills, and to make choices. How are we doing on time, Elizabeth?
We are doing good. We have just about 7 minutes left. So this is a great time to head into some Q&A. So we do have one question in the chat. If you have any other questions, I know I have a couple of questions here too. There we go. So let's go ahead and take a look at some questions that we might have. One of the questions kind of relates back to something that you shared earlier about the percentages of those who come with a more disadvantaged background. You know, thinking about the Black and Latino cultures, there was a question from Karen about what are the percentage of Caucasians that do not have financial, family, environmental support, et cetera. Do you see that in some of those studies?
Let me look back. Actually, I don't have that off the top of my head, but I'm thinking that I remember the median income percentages reflected that 60% of Blacks had the same median income as their white counterparts, and 63% of Hispanics had the same median income as their white counterparts. So that is only an indication of the advantage that whites seem to have in terms of median income, and that median income that certainly plays a role in terms of what kinds of advantages are available to students, whether they have internet connectivity, whether there's a parent that's able to be at home to support that child, whether or not they can afford a laptop enough for each member of the family to be students online, that kind of thing.
So another question we had was, how are programs such as Google Grow and others like LinkedIn Learning really disrupting the need for a college degree requirement for most jobs out there?
Well, I agree that the need for a college degree is diminishing. I think the value of the college degree is diminishing because of some of the statistics that I shared with you. That 62% of college graduates are finding careers that are that I think required a degree, and I'm not remembering the exact percentages, but there is an alarmingly low percentage of students that either found a career that was relevant to the degree that they chose. That was a smaller percentage, and then a slightly larger percentage of students who are finding a career that requires a degree at all. So, and I think employers are recognizing that they need to train their employees anyway, regardless of how many degrees they have, are starting to offer training programs. Yes. So because there is no way to prepare for the jobs of the future, the jobs are changing constantly. The jobs that we think exist, we can't possibly prepare content that is specific to careers that exist for graduates 4 years from now. We can't. Mm-hmm. The only thing we can do is give them learning skills, give them confidence, give them a growth mindset that will make them flexible learners so that they can meet any challenge.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so we have another question here, and I have a question too that kind of backs up to that. So here's a twofer. What do you think about the time it would take for teachers to develop a gamified class course, and how might us as learning leaders begin to layer in those tactics and mechanisms into their content creation, especially during this work from home time and virtual learning?
Yes, that is exactly what Fail University is trying to make easier, because the Fail University courses gamify the courses to make them fun and easy. The process of creating games for your students is hopefully fun and easy as well. The feedback I've gotten from aspiring teachers or current teachers who have taken the courses is great. You can see it on my website. It's transformative, and it is a daunting task to go about this alone. But even if you were to go about it alone, I'd recommend it. It's worth even taking a small step in this direction. You will see benefits, immeasurable benefits, from just changing the dynamic between you as presenter, changing your role from presenter to collaborator in the building of something new with your students, telling them that you becoming vulnerable. Modeling failure for your students is going to be more powerful than anything else you teach them, I think, content-wise. So taking a risk, saying, "Hey, how would you getting your students involved? They are so creative, so capable, and so game literate. You ask them, hey, why don't you take this lesson? This is what I've got. This group of kids, why don't you try and turn that into a game? Or how about you kids try, and you can do that with your whole curriculum. See what they come up with. You'll be impressed.
Gotcha. Okay. So it sounds like the initial upfront investment from us in developing the content may take a little bit of time, but that over time, there's data that might show that it might actually become an efficiency when creating content.
Well, certainly it gets easier over time, but you don't need to do it alone. You don't leverage the creativity of your students, get them involved. That process, when they become teachers, they are learning more than as students. If they're teaching you or each other, they're getting more out of whatever it is that they are trying to teach than they could from being a learner from a teacher-led presentation.
Absolutely. So right now we have one last question here. We're at 12:59, so I kind of want to squeeze it in. What about when they get evaluated as a teacher?
So meaning the teachers, what happens to the risk of fitting all this into a curriculum? Is that the question there? I'm thinking maybe that's the question.
Karen, did you want to?
I know it's a little confusing. Yeah. I know they get evaluated and they have specific requirements. A person actually comes into their classroom and has a checklist.
Yes.
And they get evaluated. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yes, and it's a fair concern, and it depends on your district. It depends on your relationship with your administrators. There are certainly ways to, and I imagine all districts are aware of and striving to meet some of these standards that are listed in front of us right now, whether they be Common Core, higher order thinking skills. If you find a way to connect your lesson to any of these super skills or SEL skills or grit or specific content, which you can use any content to create games like this, game-like lessons, then you can meet the objectives. But it's a conversation I would recommend having with teacher leaders and or administrators before you embark on this alone.
I wonder what the data shows. Are they more likely to be evaluated as higher performing teachers than those who do not instill these tactics?
Well, yes, I don't have any data on that. I know that it certainly helps to have the support of colleagues and or administrators to try something new.
Okay, well, we are at 101. So thank you so much, Jeremy. I appreciate all your great insights and the studies and data that you showed us here with the Fearless Adventures in Learning. I love it. It's great. I love to dig. And Dan Pink is awesome too. So just to kind of recap here for us together in the last 30 seconds here, just kind of wanted to share with you some member spotlights. I do have a vendor spotlight where it's open to everyone to showcase an organization via our webinar if they like to. We also have our super interesting group. So we do have a super interesting learning experience design SIG that's coming up. So check our website, make sure you sign up for that one because we're going to be looking at how to leverage marketing tactics when it comes to the way that we do learning and looking at those similarities as well. Super cool. Also, Wild is coming back, Wild 2021, navigating the next normal. What that looks like is coming in July. So be sure to take a look out for more information to come on that. You may have seen a little bit of teasers coming in, more to come. And some of the speakers that we do have aligned, we are bringing back Keith Keating. We're going to hear from Bernadette Costello in consulting and Duets in Learning. We have some great sponsors that are coming in too. So more to come. You can check out the website at atdcflwild.org for more info.
Elizabeth, I forgot to give my website address, so I'm just going to throw that out there.
Oh, please put that in the chat. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's failu.org.
Okay, so let me put that in for everyone.
Oh,
failu.org.
Yep. Yeah, I'm putting it
fantastic. I went ahead and put that in the chat here for everyone. We'll make sure we have that on the website and then in the follow-up communication as well. Our next session that we have is going to be an internship series part 1 on May 12th. And then May 18th, we have Bernadette Costello with the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. Interesting. What is love languages? How does that apply in the workplace? And then, as always, I am one of the volunteers here with us. You see Zuzo and all of our board who are volunteering their time. So we would love to engage anyone else who's interested in being a volunteer and as part of our organization. So thank you so much again for joining us today. We appreciate all your time. We'll hang back for just a few moments if anybody wants to stay on and has any additional questions. Otherwise, you have a great rest of your day. Hope you enjoyed your lunch if you brown bagged lunch it with us today. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great day.